Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Conversations from the Trenches. And today I have with me Chitra Singh, who is a sales excellence consultant. She's a sales leader with 3 decades of experience, rich, diverse leadership experience in leading high performing sales teams. She is a positive aging advocate. She is a DEI champion whose passion for an equal world, which offers equal opportunities to women, has led to the founding of India's first community that inspires and supports women to lead and excel and succeed at sales. The name of the community is Sales Womentoring. It's marked, it's tagged, the page is tagged on my post. So if you would like to check this community out, please do that. In the meantime, Chitra, welcome. So happy to have you here. Do take a moment to tell the audience a little bit about yourself in your
So
own
happy
words.
to be here. And first of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me here. I have been looking at your conversations, listening to them on LinkedIn, and I found them really interesting, genuine. And we've had the opportunity to listen and hear many, many authentic conversations. So I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Um, I'd be glad to share my journey. You've given
Yeah.
me a lovely introduction, and as you already mentioned, I'm now the founder and chief mentor at Sales Women Mentoring, which is India's only community, the first and only community inspiring women to sell. Now, why a community only for women, and that too in sales? The problem, which we are all aware of, is the gender disparity and the lack of diversity in sales. There are very few women who are proactively choosing sales roles. And out of those who choose sales roles, very few make it to the top. You're aware there are hardly 15% women in sales leadership positions. And that's why this is a problem I thought I had to address. And instead of waiting for the world around me to change or corporates to start noticing this and start doing something about it, I thought I should be the change I want to see. And that's why I founded Sales Mentoring. And prior to this, I was in selling all through my career in some of India's largest banks. And yes, there were too many men, and I
Mm,
was the lone woman in the room always. And I
yeah,
know that we're going to talk a little more about how it feels to be the only woman in the room. And I'm sure we'll have a
absolutely.
very enjoyable conversation going ahead.
Absolutely. In fact, Chitra, you rightly pointed out, you and I have done our time in domains that have traditionally belonged to men, have been run by men, and being the lone woman at the table is a whole conversation by itself. And today we are going to
Absolutely.
be not just talking about what does it mean to be a woman with career ambitions and aspirations in a man's world, but we are also going to be talking about the other side of the spectrum, which is family life. A lot of
Right.
times in our conversations, there is this perception that women cannot have it all. And when we talk about all, we're just talking about two things: work, career, leadership ambitions, and your family, right? There is a general sense it's either this or it's either that, right? This is a conversation that's come up with many leaders. And I thought Chitra, given the work she does, is the perfect person for me to unpack this conversation with, because not every conversation is for everybody. You need the right person to talk and unpack it with. So, Chitra, you are a powerful sales leader. I think, even before I met you, your reputation preceded you as a powerful sales leader. And now you
Thank you.
have a whole community for women to help them succeed at sales. Sales has traditionally been a domain of men. Even in even the more progressive and the liberal and the more inclusive industries, sales continues to be more populated by men than by women. And yet, every time I talk to you, what strikes me is your passion for sales. So I want to ask you, why sales? What makes you so passionate about sales? And what makes you so passionate about women succeeding at selling?
Right. Two very, very important questions, which talk both about my passion and purpose. So, for that, to answer that, I'll have to tell you how I got into selling. After I did
Mm-hmm.
my BSc, I knew that there were very limited options for me, and I'm talking about 32 years back. If I wanted to quickly start earning money and become financially independent, I couldn't go the academic route way, that is MSc, research, and so on. Nor did I have the money to go abroad. The
Yeah.
quickest way to get into a career and start earning money was to do an MBA, for which I started preparing. And while doing my preparations for the MBA, I decided to apply for a job because I wanted to finance my way through my MBA. I didn't want to be dependent on my parents or anyone else.
Mm,
And that's when
mm,
I applied for a job at Johnson& and Johnson. And this I'm talking about 34, 35 years back. And there were 300
yeah,
applicants. None of them were women. I was the
yeah.
only woman, and
Mm-hmm,
finally got hired as a medical rep.
mm-hmm.
And I was allocated an area which was 35 kilometers long in Bombay, from
Wow.
JJ Hospital to Mahim. And this was in
Mm-hmm,
the peak rainy season in Mumbai. And I learned
mm-hmm,
a lot about selling in those times as I moved from
mm-hmm,
chemist to chemist and doctor to doctor. And that's when I developed so much of respect for sales professionals. And I decided that selling would be my career. But
mm-hmm,
throughout, as I went on to do my MBA and later on joined banking and
mm-hmm.
became a salesperson in a bank, I realized that women were often told that selling is not the place for you.
Yeah,
It's not a suitable profession. So it's
yeah.
a deeply rooted problem, not only in the
Mm-hmm,
biases which the others around us have, but sometimes
yeah,
it's our own limiting beliefs as
yeah,
women. When we feel
yeah,
that I cannot manage the challenges, I will not be able to do
yeah,
the traveling, going to strange unknown places, meeting strange unknown people, it's not
yeah,
safe, it's too tough, and
yeah,
so on. So,
yeah.
what we need to work on is both ends, the biases
Right.
which exist in the corporate workplace, as well as
Yeah,
our own beliefs which work inside us. And I realized that
absolutely.
for women,
Mm,
proactively choosing a sales career is not even an option. They don't even
mm,
see it as an option. So we
mm,
need to elevate the place of sales and put it at par with, say, an engineer or a doctor. No one proudly
mm.
says, my daughter or son is a salesperson. We
Yeah,
don't have that pride of place. The first thing is
absolutely.
creating that. The second thing is creating the option for women to choose that. And
Mm,
once they choose to remain in sales roles to reach leadership positions, again,
yeah,
as you know, at entry level, we have 35-40% women who get
yes,
into selling. But as
yeah,
we move higher up the ladder, politics,
yeah,
biases, everything works against us and we drop out. And at
yeah,
leadership levels, there are hardly 12 to 15%. So the idea is through this community to
yeah,
provide an ecosystem which will enable women to proactively choose sales roles, remain in them, and excel to reach leadership positions. And why
absolutely.
did I choose to start this community? Is because I want women to get more confident
Mm,
at selling, to get more confident at negotiating for what they deserve at work and in life. Because a lot of us do not have the confidence, and
yeah.
selling automatically and the skills which you develop through selling and talking to the customer automatically give you the confidence to negotiate in other areas of your life.
If I may say so, and I think I mentioned this several times to you, that selling, negotiation, networking, knowing how to show up, those are not just skills you need at work, those are life skills. And
Absolutely.
unfortunately, many of us women, as girls, we are taught that we shouldn't be too forward, we shouldn't be too seen, we should be good girls. There's this whole good versus not so good girls, and there are implications that come with that. And I think what you're doing is fantastic with the community, because I think for a lot of people, women, it's not so much as selling. Women are brilliant at connecting with people. Women are very good at being empathetic and compassionate and relationship building, and these are fundamental to sales skills and negotiation. We just need to get over our biases in our minds and
Right.
say, I'm going to use these skills and play to my strengths. But you just mentioned about a whole career trajectory, from starting from, pounding the pavement to
Yes.
seat at the table. Can I invite
Right.
you to share a little bit more of your leadership journey? And I'm really curious to know, what was it like being a competitive, ambitious woman in a man's world?
That's right. So, like I said, I started as a medical rep, and there couldn't be any more difficult a place to start than there.
Yeah,
Moved
yeah,
on to banking, and of course, that is a whole different level of selling because the
mm,
customer is more demanding. In a bank, you're dealing with money, and
yeah,
you don't have a physical product to show. All you
yeah,
have to do is to build trust and credibility because a person has to trust you with their money.
Yeah.
Finally, I joined banking, and again, I was offered the option of doing the so-called softer roles in operations or in the back
Hmm.
office or in
Hmm.
process and so on. But I chose to start with a customer-facing role, first
Hmm.
in the customer service desk in the branch, and then out selling in business
Hmm.
development. And the reason I chose that is because I felt that the biggest way to make a difference is to go out there and
Hmm.
tell people how you can
Hmm.
change their lives. And I feel
Hmm.
that sales is not just a profession, it's an
Yeah.
opportunity to change lives. And I say this again
Yeah.
and again at every opportunity I can get, that it's a
Hmm.
calling, it's a purpose, and it's a
Hmm.
way, an opportunity to make a difference to people's lives and to show
Hmm.
them a better life and to tell
Hmm.
them that you can change their lives for the better. If you view sales like that, obviously, automatically the pride and passion comes through. Coming
Yeah.
to my leadership journey, I was the only woman regional head in a very large
Hmm.
bank, which is known
Hmm.
for its women-friendly policies. And yet, in a room
Hmm.
full of 26 regional heads, I was the only woman. And
Hmm.
the first time when this role came up it was opened up because of a resignation. I was not
Hmm.
offered the role. And I was
Oh,
told
okay.
that, yes, I was not offered the role, it went to someone else.
Hmm.
And I was told that I need to be a strategic thinker in order to be able to lead. And I knew that I was at 120% of my numbers. My team spoke highly, they loved me. And
Hmm.
we were overperformers everywhere. And yet I didn't get the job. I resolved then that I would, within 6 months, have the job, which I
Hmm.
did. And that's another story. I wouldn't get into it. I did it, and we turned that entire region around. The region
Hmm.
concerned was Chennai. And when I
Hmm.
took over, it was at 45% of the target. And by the time we finished in another 5 months, we did the
Hmm.
annual target. We
Hmm.
completed the annual target in a period of 5 months. Now,
Hmm.
how was it, you are asking me? After these kind of numbers, in selling, in sales,
Hmm.
it's numbers which talk. Once you
Yeah.
have these kind of numbers, there is no need to talk about your competence. It's there for all to say,
Yeah. Yeah.
for all to see. I'm not
Hmm.
saying that women don't need to advocate themselves. I'm not saying that we don't need to promote. We do need to speak up and we need to talk about our achievements. But
Hmm.
yet, here the numbers spoke for themselves.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough, and in a world where we constantly talk about the bias and the unfairness, I was fortunate enough to have managers who really believed in me. So
Hmm.
a lot of the people around me were so
Hmm.
supportive that in my
Yeah.
journey, it became an enabler rather than a blocker.
If I may say so, I'm going to dial back to something you raised, which is about women being strategic thinkers. And as a personal branding strategist, I often get women who come and tell me that I'm being told I cannot be promoted because I'm not strategic. And I don't
Right.
know what strategic means, right? And my question always to them, I have two questions almost always for them. One is, have you asked the person who's evaluating you as to what do they mean by strategic? Because strategic is a word. It can mean different things to different people, and it's really important to understand what strategic means. I think the second thing that I'm picking up from what you're sharing is uh, your relevance to the business. What is your relevance to the business? A lot of times, I see a lot of people and women getting very upset because they've worked really hard, they've slogged, they've slaved, but they're not recognized. And it's not enough for us to think that, oh, yes, I'm doing a fantastic job. Every business is about making money. It's about making profits as much as it is about CSR and doing good and making a difference in people's life. And everybody if you can make a business case for how relevant are you to the business, then you are being strategic and you are owning it. And obviously, as you've given us a beautiful example of how your numbers showed your relevance to the business, which was great incentive for your team members, your colleagues at higher leadership levels to trust you and embrace your progression up the ladder, right?
Right.
But I still do want to ask you, what was it like to be an ambitious woman in a man's world? As a woman, I want the gender lens here now.
Yeah, at times I was told that you won't be accepted in
Hmm.
this role. you will
Hmm.
have a predominantly male team, and
Yeah.
they have to accept you. When I was up for a promotion, I was told that 50% of the leadership believes that you are there, and
Yeah.
50% doesn't feel that you are yet ready for the role,
Hmm.
without telling me directly what is the meaning of ready. And when I asked what is the meaning of ready, again
Yeah.
they had no answers. So the
Yeah.
fact is that yes, they do view you through a gender lens, and constantly
Hmm.
you have to keep proving yourself. And I feel that women have to prove themselves again and
Yes.
again for the same
Yeah.
promotion, and that is something which you can view as unfair, and or you can view it as, yes, this is part of this whole game, and I have to manage this and move along. Like you rightly said, politics in the workplace won't go away. These biases won't go away. And while
Yeah.
corporates are working towards and taking DEI initiatives, there is also something within us which has to move, right? We keep talking about the needle to move outside. There's a needle within us which also has to move, and we have to raise our voice. And I keep saying that the most important weapons, if I may call them that, in a woman's hand are her voice and her choices,
Yeah.
right? Use them powerfully. Use your choices and your voice powerfully to make a difference in your life and those of others. And the minute you give that power of choice away to someone else, you feel powerless. You no longer are in control of your future. And that is what I feel a lot of women do. We give away the power to make choices, and we give away the power to speak up. We need to speak up, and we need to believe that we deserve equality. And we also need to believe that compromise or sacrifice is not the biggest virtue. It is all right
Yeah.
to choose
Yeah.
ambition over accommodation, or to choose
Yeah.
conviction and follow your
Yeah.
ambition rather
Yeah.
than accommodate all the time.
Absolutely. I agree 200%. I'm so glad you raised this point about ambition is not an undesirable trait or quality in women. It is a desirable trait because if you're ambitious at work, you're going to be ambitious for yourself in your life. You're going to be ambitious for the people in you love. And that's how you make a big positive difference. As long as its values aligned, it will give you help you create a life that you want for yourself. But now that we are talking about ambition and we've talked about work, one of the biggest biases against women at the workspace is their inability to balance the work with families. And this we see a lot with the younger women, in the late 20s, early 30s, because there is this bias, this inherent bias that, oh, eventually women will leave to have families, or when once they have families, they're not able to bring their A game to the, to the work
Sure.
space. Yeah, and there is almost this whole thought process that a woman can either have a career which is a secondary subset of her family, or to be successful in her career, you can't really have a family. And many women leaders have articulated this where they've been either told outright or it has been implied in conversations. I want to
Right.
know what's your take on this?
For me, actually, I think leaving my career or putting my ambition aside was never a choice.
Hmm.
And when you have made up your mind that it is never a choice to leave, then you will do everything possible in order to make
Hmm.
sure that you stay. And so
Hmm.
for me, it was never a choice to leave. I know that, there are lots of people who say there are times when I've thought, no, this is too much for me and I cannot
Hmm.
do it. Yes, there have been times
Hmm.
when I've had doubts. But then
Hmm.
always I believe that you need to have a supportive ecosystem around you. You need to negotiate with your spouse and negotiate for equal division of work and childcare. And that is where I feel women tend to lose out. They do not
Hmm.
negotiate at home. A lot
Yeah.
of us don't even talk, when you're getting married, about when and how. I mean, not how, sorry. When are you going to have kids? Who's going to raise
Yeah.
them? Who's going to
Yeah.
contribute most to parenting? How are we going to divide the domestic responsibilities? I'm not saying this is like an agreement which you have to document and sign,
Yeah.
but I do
Yeah.
believe that you have to have an agreement on this. Who will contribute how
Absolutely.
much? And there has to be an equal division of the domestic responsibilities and childcare. The minute that becomes unequal, you start questioning then whether you can do justice to your roles, and you will not be able to. And again, in my case, you asked specifically, I had a supportive spouse, of course, and I had a supportive family who would step in
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
I had to travel.
Yeah.
Rarely there was a time when both of us had to travel together. But if it
Hmm.
was like that, I had a family who would step in and support. So again, my message to women is not to hesitate to ask. Use your
Hmm.
ecosystem around you, and even at
Hmm.
work. ask or tell your boss that this is how it is. For example, I would go home for nearly 6 7 months. I was a new branch manager and I had taken over at as branch head just
Mm,
after I am my maternity leave. So when I came
mm,
back from my maternity leave with a small baby in my arms, I was actually reporting as a branch manager of a new branch,
yeah,
responsibility which I was given despite
yeah,
the fact that I went on ML.
yeah,
Finally, I come back and I go back home every day for an hour and a half in the afternoon to feed the baby.
yeah,
And one day
yeah,
I call my reporting manager and say that, sir, I hope you know that I'm not there in the office between 1 and XYZ. So he says, I'm not interested in the timing. Did I ask you
yeah,
when you're coming and going?
yeah,
I'm interested in your
yeah,
results and that you're
yeah,
doing. So I
yeah,
really believe that you need to ask for all the support you can from your family, from your spouse, especially from your spouse when it comes to
yeah,
childcare, and of
yeah,
course from your organization. It's not shameful to ask, and it's not
yeah,
a problem. We feel as
yeah,
women that it will reflect on our professionalism if we go
yes,
earlier on a single day because we have a parent teacher meeting, or if we say the child is sick and choose the child that day, then we are bad professionals. Or if we go to a meeting and leave the child at home, then we are a bad mother and we keep
yeah,
beating ourselves up and
yeah,
criticizing ourselves.
yeah,
I think it's a matter of priorities, it's a
yeah,
matter of asking for help, and it's a
yeah,
matter of organizing yourself and the childcare and the support around you. For that,
absolutely.
maybe you have to defer your decision to have a child till you can afford proper childcare.
Yeah,
I think a lot of us, if we have children early, we are not able to afford
yeah,
the right childcare. We can't afford to pay, and it's a fact.
yeah,
It makes economic sense to probably defer the decision. I had
yeah,
a child at of 10 years after my marriage, and that
mm,
really goes against the grain when it comes to especially
yeah,
India, because in
yes,
India, when you
yes,
get married, the questions start. When is the
hmm,
child coming? And so on and so forth.
absolutely.
We deferred
Hmm,
it because I knew that I wanted to focus on my career and that we should both be able to afford childcare to give the child
yeah,
a good environment to live in.
absolutely.
With all the
You know,
support you have around you.
Chitra, I'm going to invite you to please share an incident that I read about in one of your posts, which made me smile when I read it. And you talked about how you had to go for a meeting, your spouse was traveling. It was one of those days when, that you had to take care of the child, but you had a meeting at short notice, and how you actually had your younger colleague babysit while you went out for the
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah, it was
Can,
funny.
can you can you
It's
please
funny.
share that, because I found that amusing, but at the same time I found it extremely powerful, and I would really like for the women who are listening to hear from
Yeah.
you what that was about, that was like.
Right. So often work-life balance involves thinking of creative solutions and thinking out of the box. And these
Yeah.
kind of situations will keep hitting you. Like, for
Yeah.
example, in a live, the tech can go wrong and you have to have the
Yes.
presence of mind. Similarly,
Absolutely.
in life,
Yeah.
your nanny can go on leave.
Yeah.
She can be on sick leave, and
Yeah.
obviously she deserves. And my spouse
Hmm.
was traveling. There was no one at home who could step in
Yeah.
at the last minute. I had this appointment with a top government official,
Hmm.
and that they don't reschedule the appointments, and they're also
Yeah.
particular about the designation of the person who's meeting them. They do not change
Right.
at the last minute. It was
Yeah.
crucial that we go because we needed permission to be empaneled
Hmm.
for government investments, and for a
Hmm.
bank, government as a source of investments is a huge,
Yeah.
very big source we can't afford to ignore. So I couldn't cancel the
Yeah.
call. And
Yeah.
so I decided to take the child, the ball, and my driver, and the car, and her bottle along with me. She was, I think, about less than a year old, and the sales
Hmm.
manager along with me. And I gave the
Hmm.
ball, the bottle, and the baby to the sales manager, and he was waiting below the building. I went up and I finished my call in 15 minutes. And these calls are usually very short
Yeah.
because
Hmm.
the senior officials don't give you much time. I made my
Yeah.
point, gave my papers, and left it.
Hmm.
And at the end of it, he offered me tea. I said, no, thank you, sir. Usually I never refuse tea, but my baby's downstairs and I need to go because the nanny's on leave. Even he found it funny. But he said, I admire your
Yeah.
commitment in coming here. And
Yeah.
obviously, we got the empanelment, and we got a lot of money, a lot of funds, which I can't mention here.
Hmm.
But I also want to add here that my branch became the fastest branch to cross
Yeah.
the 100 crore deposits.
Yeah.
And I think within 5 or 6 months, we became a billionaire branch, all due to funds from various appreciative customers
Hmm.
like these.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm still smiling when I think about that because I can actually visualize it. But I'm
Yeah,
going to recenter our focus onto a very important point that you're making out here, which is really women having to create space for what they want in their life, for what makes them joyful and what makes them passionate, and not beating ourselves up because society or everything around us is telling us that we should be in a certain way, whether it's having a baby within 2 years of getting married, or what it means to be a homemaker or a caregiver, and about having those conversations with the stakeholders in your life, most importantly the partner that you want to spend the rest of your life with, right? But I want to ask you, because you did also mention that there have been times when you questioned whether you could do the balancing act. What was that like? Can you give us like two or three instances when you were really pushed against the wall and you felt, oh my God, I might have to choose at this point? And how did you navigate your way past each of these situations?
Yeah, I think the first was, I call them the three dreaded M's: marriage, mobility, motherhood. And these are the ones which keep holding women back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they should be positive, beautiful phases in a woman's life. But
Yeah.
instead, they become a kind of obstacles in our careers. And the first was mobility. Marriage did
Mm-hmm.
not put brakes, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
mobility did. And I remember that in a very large MNC bank, I had a boss
Mm-hmm.
who used to keep making very inappropriate comments, and
Yeah.
you would say, borderline inappropriate behavior.
Yeah.
Never really pushing past something, but borderline.
Yeah.
And make
Yeah.
comments on my weight, on my appearance. Oh, I think you're getting
Mm-hmm.
fat, and so on. When I hired
Yeah.
you, you were so slim. Those kind of
Yeah.
things. After some time, I
Yeah.
couldn't put up with it. I quit. I
Mm.
told him very clearly that this is not the way you must be talking and treating to women in your team. I'm quitting,
Yeah.
and so on. I left.
Mm.
But after
Mm.
that, I was looking for a job in Mumbai, and he was transferred to Bangalore,
Mm. Mm.
right? So
Right.
at that time, I knew a lot of people in Mumbai. My network was there, and I knew I could easily get a job. So I quit.
Mm.
But here,
Mm.
this transfer comes through, and then I have to shift to Bangalore, new place, new people, no connections, no network. And for nearly a year, I didn't find a job. And at that time, I
Mm.
really began questioning my abilities, and I really began to think, okay, am I really good enough to work? Maybe I should just quit and
Mm.
make tea at home and play the good housewife and so on. I have a lot of respect for housewives, but then it should be
Yeah.
your own choice to be a
Uh,
homemaker or a career woman. And at
yeah.
that time, I started questioning
Yeah.
whether I should go back to work or stay at home. That was a tough phase, but finally I got into ICICI Bank after that. I had to take a
Okay.
salary cut and so on, but all that is history, and I went up the ladder pretty fast there. The second
Mm.
time was when I was pregnant because I had a difficult pregnancy and I was in
Mm.
sales. And I
Mm.
insisted on going on sales calls till the end. In fact, she was born
Mm.
on 27th of February. I went on my last call on 26th of February evening.
Mm.
So
Mm.
even with, at 9 months, I was going out on sales calls, but I had a
Mm.
difficult time. So health
Mm.
wise, again, I wondered whether I was really being too unfair to myself and
Yeah.
whether I should take some rest.
Yeah.
Finally, I moved past that phase. And at that
Mm.
time, ML was only 3 months
Mm.
and I went back to work. But
Mm.
fortunately, recovered very fast after the child
Right.
was born. But during that phase, I did think that it's not worth it because physically I didn't have the energy,
Yeah.
and I had to push
Yeah.
myself many times. But at those
Mm.
times, I reminded myself this is a phase, and just
Right.
like there's a tough phase, there will be
Yeah.
a better phase going forward. And that's all
Yeah.
you need to look at it, because in life
Yeah.
there will be several of these challenges and phases, and you can't
Yes.
let that stop you. You have to look forward and move on.
Absolutely. So, Pearl had asked us a question some time back. She said, I love the term voice and choice. Many women don't feel comfortable to speak up. What advice would you give to women to help them find their voice?
Right. So, like I already said, that is the most powerful weapon we have, our voices and choices. But unfortunately, because of expectations, because of the need
Yeah.
for validation, because of the
Yeah.
need to not be judged
Mm.
unfairly or criticized or to be
Mm.
accepted by our family and society, we often compromise and choose
Yeah.
safer options, so
Mm.
called.
Mm.
So I feel that the only way we can go forward is by speaking up and using our voice to make a difference. And the more women join in and raise their
Yeah.
voice and talk about it, the collective voice, is much stronger than the individual voice.
Yeah.
And I think we need more women speaking up and more women role models and more women leaders speaking up to really make a change in society.
Yeah. If I may add on to that, that's a very, very important and valid point. And I will also add my two bit out here, which is most of us as women, what do we want? We want respect, we want love. These are human requirements. We want love, we want respect, we want to be cherished. We want to be seen and heard as authentic human beings, not for what we can give people, but for ourselves. And I think that starts with us respecting ourselves. A lot of times when we don't speak our truth or we don't use our voice, we are denying our own authenticity. This is something, of course, authenticity is personal branding lingo, which is overused in today's world, but it really
Yeah.
boils down to you knowing what your truth is, you knowing what your values is, and then you living your life and making micro choices according to that. It just what Chitra says is just that. It just boils down to making micro choices that are aligned to your truth, what makes you happy, and you stand up for yourself. So thank you so much for asking us that question, Pearl. I can see there are so many others who are weaving in and out of the conversation. Please say hello if you have insights, experiences, questions. Please drop it in the chat box. We're having a great conversation here. We would love for you to jump right in and um, kind of add momentum and impetus to what we are talking. But coming back, Chitra, we've talked so much about women and what women should be doing, right? And I think one of the things I notice in the mainstream is we have so much conversations about what women should be doing. Deal with your inner critic, deal with your imposter syndrome, step up, so on and so forth. We don't have enough conversations about the workscapes. We don't have enough conversations about the tables of power. Both the workscapes and the tables of power are made by men for men, largely. It
Right.
isn't. It isn't, and women are. We're trying to squeeze women into these spaces, right? And you and I have again talked about this quite often, that most of these spaces, the landscape at work, is embedded with biases and it upholds stereotypes that not only affect women's careers, but also uh, you know, cause them to drop out. And you've mentioned this in the conversation already. So, what have you observed and what have you encountered? Could you give us a little perspective of your experiences with the landscape in terms of the biases, the microaggressions, and the stereotypes that we're limiting?
Right. One of the instances I had already mentioned when I was working with the MNC bank, the inappropriate comments,
Yeah,
the inappropriate, borderline harassment, and never
yeah,
crossing the line. So sexual
yeah.
harassment is a very real phenomenon in most
It
corporates, and
is.
in most
It is.
cases, the women don't call it out because
Yeah.
there are committees set up by this for this, headed by women,
Mm,
but they all ask for proof. I need to have an SMS. There was this incident in one of the banks I worked in where one
mm,
of the women came up to us and complained, but she didn't have a single SMS. The person would call and she hadn't recorded the call, or the person would talk face to face, and there was no proof. And when there is no proof, it is her word against his.
yeah.
So we have this whole, shifting the blame, victim
Mm,
blaming. So the
yeah.
perpetrator goes away scot free because the whole
Yeah.
environment is supporting him in this
Yeah.
case. And
I agree.
here it is the lady in question who was being blamed.
Yeah.
And often this blame shifting happens where
Mm,
we shift the blame from the perpetrator to the person who is actually complaining about it or who is at the receiving end of this. I've seen this a lot happening. There is always
mm,
a gender pay gap, which we keep talking about, that for
yeah.
every $1 a man earns, we earn 82 cents. And
Yeah.
that gender gap persists in sales too, despite the fact that win rates of women are 11% higher than women, and women
Mm,
led teams have a quota achievement rate which is 3% higher and a better
mm,
diversity ratio overall, 75 is to
mm,
25. Despite
mm,
that, women are paid 21% less in sales. So the
mm,
gender pay gap is a reality. And the
yeah.
fact that I think organizations don't have equitable work policies which support childcare. For
Yeah.
example, you don't have a
Yeah.
childcare allowance because I think they
Yes.
view it as an extra expense. But the
Yes.
fact is, childcare is a dual responsibility, and I think
Yeah.
giving an allowance would work and go a long way in
Yeah.
having a work life balance, and also will
Yeah.
prevent a lot of women dropping out of the workforce. And then there's a very real pregnancy discrimination bias, which I talked
Yeah.
about earlier,
Yeah.
that though
Yeah.
when I was pregnant, that problem was not there. But oh, she won't come back to work, or she will probably take 7, 8 months off. In fact, in one of the banks which I worked, again, I don't want to mention the name,
Yeah. Yeah.
women were given a default rating of 4 or 5, which was one of the lowest. And
Wow.
the answer always given was, oh, she's going on ML, or she's already been on ML for 6 months of the year. So what is the point?
Mm.
Let's not waste a good rating on her. And there is a limited
Mm.
pie of bonus, and there is a bell curve in the ratings, which you know.
Yeah.
So why would
Yeah.
we waste the ones and twos on women who are on ML? So by default, they're not given promotions, raises, bonuses, and they are
Yeah.
given the default rating. It did not
Yeah.
happen with me because my manager was supportive and his wife was working and she was a banker too. So I
Mm-hmm.
think he understood the trials and tribulations, if I could say that, of a working woman.
Mm.
So
Mm.
he was extremely supportive, and I did get a promotion the year I went on
Mm.
ML,
Mm.
which is the happy part of the story. But this
Yeah.
pregnancy discrimination is again a very real, uh, very real story
I
happening in the workplace, and the lack of child support. Also,
Yeah.
I feel work from home has been much more unfair to
Yeah.
women than to
Yeah.
men,
Yeah.
because they are
Yeah.
viewed, as you rightly said in the beginning, as the primary caregivers, and men are
Yeah.
viewed as the primary breadwinners. So when you
Absolutely.
define gender roles and responsibilities so stereotypically, obviously the man is a breadwinner, he brings in the money, the woman is the caregiver, she brings in the care
Mm.
and the nurturing. And while
Mm.
I'm not saying we change our genetics or biology, I understand we cannot do that. At the same time, we can have an equitable distribution, and we can have a recognition of that at the workplace, to have good work from
Yeah.
home policies, which restrict working hours to a certain time and so on, which create time
Yeah.
for or flexi
Yeah.
timing, because then a
Yeah.
lot of women wouldn't drop out altogether. We do
Yeah.
have organizations like FlexiBees and all working towards
Yeah.
hiring women for flexible positions. So there is progress. It's not like all dark. There is a lot of
Yeah.
progress.
Yeah, of course, there is a lot of progress. I mean, you've practically, because this is so interesting, because we don't have as many conversations about all these factors you've talked about. You've talked about sexism, you've talked about harassment, you've talked about borderline inappropriate behaviors, you've talked about body shaming, you've talked about you
The
know
pregnancy
preg-
discrimination. Yeah.
pregnancy bias and discrimination, even marriage bias and discrimination, the
Right. Yeah,
mobility,
she's married now.
yeah, the mobility factor, the boys club, because a lot of times when you're the only woman in the room, and you and I were talking about it just before we came on air, that if you're the only woman on the room, you are spending a lot of your time with your ear on the ground, because a lot of networking happens out of office hours, behind, over drinks, which, like you said, we are not often even aware of, let alone be invited to, right?
Right. Right.
So
Because it is assumed. It is assumed, oh, she mustn't
yeah.
be drinking. She doesn't smoke. I don't think she will be comfortable in this
Yes.
boys' club meeting.
Yes.
Our jokes may embarrass her, and so on. And then I
Yes.
realized that I was the one laughing the loudest. Uh, and I
Yeah.
realized that was again going against the gender stereotype, because I was supposed to be this virtuous woman who didn't understand a single thing about what was going on. And I was supposed to
Right.
ask very
Yes.
innocently at the end of it, ye kya tha, or what is happening here? And obviously,
Right.
you don't conform to that stereotype. And I call it,
Absolutely.
the double bind dilemma. A lot has been written about it, the double bind dilemma which women face. So if we
Mhm.
exhibit weak and submissive, so-called gender typical behavior, then we are
Yeah.
viewed as too soft, emotional, not competent enough to be leaders. But if
Yes.
we have our own opinions, we are confident, we are bold, then we are viewed as, oh, she's difficult, she's very aggressive. And so
Yes.
both ways, damned if you do and damned if you don't. We are always in a double
Absolutely.
bind.
Absolutely.
Even when we
Absolutely.
conform to gender stereotypes, we have a problem. And when we don't, there is still a problem. We are judged either ways. So the best
Right.
way is use your choices and use your voice
Yes.
and go forward.
Yes, I'm just so glad we are having this conversation about the landscape, because one of the things that gets my goat is we don't have enough conversations about it. And more importantly, we don't, because there's a paucity of women leaders who have walked that path, we don't have enough people to have these conversations about. So
That's right.
it's so important for us, and particularly in the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion, to really talk about what is going on in the landscape. The landscape has to change, because the workforce composition has changed, the our present, the reality we live in today has changed, and therefore what worked 50 years ago, even 30 years ago, even 10 years ago doesn't work anymore today, right? But we can only hope that with the focus on DE and I, that the workscapes will start to catch up with the changes in the workforce, and the fact that there are more and more women who are coming out and saying, I want a career and I want equal pay and I want access to opportunities and I want to be judged on merit and all of that. But today, in the here and now, although we have a few companies like FlexiBees, and we have now Flipkart, which has taken on a period leave, and we have few examples here and there. By and large, particularly in the Indian context, most of the companies, the workscapes at most of the companies continue to be pretty old school. It's pretty traditional still. It is still studded with biases and microaggressions, and it upholds stereotypes, right? And this is the
Right.
landscape women will continue to navigate for some more time. And it's
Right.
so, and because it's so imperative for us to get more women into the leadership, up the leadership ladder. It's so important for us to get the numbers up at the top of the ladder. This is a terrain we have to navigate. How do women today in the present landscape navigate the workscapes that is embedded with the biases, embedded with the microaggressions, like you said, sexism, harassment, the discrimination, all of that? What tips do you have?
You brought out one point which I feel will work where women are concerned. That the fact that women are underrepresented, that is another problem with the entire ecosystem, that we are completely
Yeah.
underrepresented. So
Yes.
the workforce participation female across the world is 40%. In India,
Yeah.
we are at 20%. And
Yes.
if you look at the global gender index done by the
Mm.
World Economic Forum, India is some 136th out of
Yeah.
141 countries. So really,
Yeah.
we have a long way to go. I think it'll take about 200 years for us to achieve that equality. But having
Yeah.
said that, the more women there are in leadership positions, the more women we have as role
Yeah.
models and as
Yeah.
mentors, the more voices there will be
Yeah.
speaking up for issues which concern women. Because what
Yeah.
concerns us may
Yeah.
not necessarily concern a person of the other gender. Not that they're
Yeah.
wrong. Maybe they view it through a different lens,
Yeah.
or maybe those
Yeah.
are not priorities for them. And the issue
Absolutely.
today is that DEI is a good to have. It's not a must to have. People don't
Yeah.
believe that it should be part of your goals. It's not
Yeah.
part of your KPIs. It is not
Yeah.
tracked and measured, and people are not
Yeah.
held accountable. So it's a good
Yeah.
to have. So I
Yeah.
tick it off. I've had a posh workshop, or
Yeah.
I have done my work from home training, or I have
Yeah.
done my gender bias training, or I have done
Yeah.
a cultural audit, and so on. It's a good to have, and it's a tick. But the fact
Yeah.
is, how much accountability is there? And I
Yes.
feel that the
Yes.
more women we have as leaders, and the
Yeah.
more women we have as role models and mentors for young
Yeah.
women getting into
Yeah.
careers, the more
Yeah.
women's issues will come to the forefront. And
Yes.
the priorities and the imbalances which exist will
Yeah.
get the kind of attention they deserve. And therefore,
Absolutely.
I think it is imperative upon all of us as women to support other women on their
Yes.
way towards leadership positions. So the three dreaded
Absolutely.
M's, but there is one M, which is find yourself a good mentor or a sponsor, and
Yep.
preferably a woman who's made it. That can make all the difference. And the second M, which is quite cliched, is the mother, right? So if you have your mother as a strong role model who's
Mm.
working and who
Mm.
sets uh, the right kind of environment at home, because ultimately the gender bias and the training begins at home, the values. For
Yeah.
example, the language we use at home,
Yeah. Yeah.
the kind of values we impart at home, the way we
Yeah.
treat our boys and girls, the things we
Yeah.
say to them, the
Yeah.
adjectives we use to
Yeah.
describe them. Like a girl is always called pretty, beautiful. Oh, you're so pretty, you're so cute. But you tell the
Yeah.
boy, don't cry like a girl, you're a strong, brave boy. We tell
Yeah.
them that. So boys are told they are strong, they are brave. And so they grow up as these confident human beings who feel they can take on the world. I'm not saying
Yeah.
all men are like that. I know they have their own set of fears and problems.
Yeah.
But women are told a different story, and we are applauded
Yeah. Yeah.
and rewarded and
Yeah.
appreciated for being virtuous and meek and submissive.
Yeah.
Whereas a man is probably applauded and complimented for being bold and brave and intelligent. So the language
Yeah.
which we start, we need to be more sensitive about what is the language we are using at home, how we are talking to our girls at home.
Yeah.
And in my case, my mother was a working woman, and which is why I said having a strong mentor at work and having a strong mother at home, both these work. She was working, so again, working was never a choice for me. And I knew that at that time she went through far more difficult times than me, because
Yeah.
that was 50 years
Yeah.
back. 50
Yeah.
years back, she had 3 kids and still managed
Yeah.
both. So there is
Mm.
no reason why we cannot have both home and career. Yes, on certain days you might give priority to your job, and on certain days you might give priority to your career. But stop trying to be perfect all the time, and stop
Yes.
listening to those people who are telling you to be perfect. Oh, if you leave the
Yes.
kid at home in the care of the nanny, they may fall sick. What kind of values? I think these voices and the chatter around you, you need to shut out. You need to listen to your
Yeah.
inner voice, and
Absolutely.
you need to make your decisions, and sorry to use the word again, choices which are in congruence with your deepest
Yeah.
and highest values. And as
Yeah.
long you believe, as you believe that
Yeah.
to be an effective role model for your daughter,
Mm.
you need to be a strong independent woman. And I think
Absolutely.
that is the best service we can do to the future generation, where we
Yeah.
teach both our boys as well as our girls what
Yeah.
equality really is. Because on one
Yeah.
hand, like you rightly said, we are telling our girls to step up, be confident, work, go out,
Yeah.
face the world. But we are not telling our boys the same thing. We are not teaching them what it means in terms of their contribution and
Yeah.
their part of it, when they have
Yeah.
to be an equal partner
Yes.
in this
Absolutely.
whole land.
Yeah. No, I think it boils down to challenging stereotypes because I think one thing we all have to recognize is a stereotype is like a box. It's like a label and it's for a mass. It's not for the individual. As individuals, we are unique. We are all different. We are gifted in different ways. We come with different aspirations. We come with a different purpose. Even our very existence on earth is, we have a purpose for it, and that's we are designed for that. And if we keep trying to fit ourselves into boxes that these stereotypes are, we are denying our unique humanness. And you make such an important point about the stereotypes that affect women and the stereotypes that affect men. There is, it can be oppressive and it can be comforting, both of it, and both genders and every gender in between and otherwise out of it are oppressed because of these stereotypes. So it's really, really important to challenge it. I love the point that you've made about the mother being a role model. But if like me, you have a mother who didn't work and therefore didn't set that preceded, you always can look around your ecosystem and find the women who did. For me, in my
Right.
case, it was my grandmother. It was also my
Absolutely.
aunt,
Right.
who were very powerful careerists. They were not even working women; they were careerists who went out and got their career, and that has been a big motivation for me. We have Olivia says, and I feel it's not a man versus woman or white versus black, just allowing awareness from our thoughts, actions, words, and enabling diversity of voices. We are all important. Thank you for sharing that quote. That it totally, you know, weaves into what we are talking about. So thank you so much for that and all the other comments you put out there. I think we're like almost at the end of the hour. Chitra, any last words before we wrap up? I mean, we have so much to talk about. I think we can talk for the next 2-3 hours, you and me, about each of these little subtopics that we have raised. But any last words that you want to leave our audience with before we sign off for the
Yes.
evening?
We did talk about the ecosystem, we did talk about the landscape, but I think the biggest shift has to happen within us. So I see a lot of women coming to me for mentoring,
Yeah,
and they say, oh, I'm afraid of selling and I'm afraid of going
yeah,
out, I'm not confident.
yeah,
Even entrepreneurs or
yeah,
solopreneurs, they
yeah,
are confident about their product, but they're not confident about going out and selling it, and they delegate it
yeah,
to someone else, and they make someone else speak about the product which they have so lovingly built up and nurtured, and about
yes,
the company which they have so
yeah,
with so much of care and
yeah,
love they have built, and they leave it because of their fears. And again, those limiting biases are within us. So my only advice to women is not to let challenging circumstances or what is happening to you around you defeat you or define you or limit you. The only way
right,
we can change is if that shift happens within ourselves, and if that change
absolutely,
happens within ourselves. And the minute we start letting what the world says define us, rather we must define what is right for us, and then
yeah,
make decisions in accordance with what is right and what works with our values. That's the only thing I would like to pass on as a
yeah,
message to
yeah.
all
I think
women listening.
I think that's a very important point you make, that you build something with a lot of love, and you know that whatever you've made, that product or the service or whatever it is that you have created with love, is going to change lives for the better or shape lives for the better. It is going to create value. But the only difference between this product sitting in the, in the dark recesses of your cupboard, vis-a-vis it actually going out and actualizing its potential to change lives, is your voice. And the sooner you realize, you redefine your selling, your negotiation, the way you engage with the world in the context of creating value, I think you are already on a path to empower yourself in a lot of ways. And again, selling is not a job. Selling is a life skill. We need it in various aspects of our life, be it in parenting, be it with our partners, be it with our friends. We need it. And I think that's a beautiful point you've made. Thank you so much, Chitra, for joining me. Thank you for this fantastic conversation, for your brutal honesty. I did tell the people on my feed and my community that you will get brutal honesty, and you have delivered on that. So thank you so much for it. To everybody who's joined us today, thank you.